I am here today and honored and blessed to be having the chance to have a conversation with Katherine Henry from Michigan, who many people who are on the inside of the burgeoning patriot movement will know she, if I got it correct, did an amicus brief for the fight against Gretchen Whitmer's unconstitutional overreach in the state of Michigan, and they won that case. And so I'm sitting here today a little bit flummoxed because I'm not used to sitting here with someone who knows the Constitution so well. And so, Katherine, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the Restore Freedom Initiative, how you decided to get started with that, and what motivated you. Is there a particular spiritual perspective that causes that for you? Is it strictly constitutional, or do those two things work together?
That wasn't a loaded question at all.
Yeah, I know.
So did you, the beginning of that was to tell a little bit background of just the initiative? Is that the first part of it?
And how you got started with that.
Okay. Well, I guess let me back up and say that I was born in Michigan. I was raised in Orlando, Florida. But then I finished high school and went to college and graduated from law school in Minnesota. And I was licensed to practice law in Minnesota first before moving here to Michigan. And well, I guess my Minnesota, well, you can see my law degree from barely in my college degree from Minnesota behind me. Yeah, anyone who knew me in law school knew that I had a passion for families, for single moms, as I was for several years, for people, for the disadvantaged, for people who whose rights are trampled on in a variety of ways every day. And so I actually thought for sure I would always be in family law. And my family law professor in Minnesota, Nancy Versteeg, told me when I was a first-year law student that at some point, family law just burns you out if you do it solely, and I probably wouldn't stay in it forever just doing family law. Well, it's not that it burnt me out, actually. It's, things changed. When I moved to Michigan, I opened my own law practice, and I didn't have the benefit of having studied the laws here in Michigan and getting to know all that unwritten stuff about how things work here. And so the course of my practice just kind of ebbed and flowed depending on what the needs in the community were. And when I got married to my husband, he moved me to the other side of the state, and things were a lot different in the county that I moved to than where I had been in. When I first moved to Michigan, I moved to Midland County, which is of course the home of Dow Chemical Company. And it's just, it had its own little bubble. And I moved during the 2008 recession. So that was really great for the price of my house to sell in Minnesota at that time. Basically I was just an everyday attorney doing everyday things, contracts and landlord-tenant and divorces and bankruptcy and, real estate, you name it, everything. And, I've always had a passion for doing the right thing. And what I believed to be was a passion for the Constitution. But at any rate, so the course of my career kind of developed and changed, and I've served as a public defender, both for the state of Minnesota and then also here in Michigan, a totally different system. Michigan's behind the times by about 3 or 4 decades. But anyway, doing that really opened my eyes to the needs of people and the rights of people. And also in doing the work as a lawyer guardian ad litem, which I've done here. Now in Minnesota, assuming it's still the same as when I practiced there, you were never a lawyer and a guardian ad litem in the same case. You were one or the other. There's ethical considerations as to why that needs to be. And so I've actually served as a guardian ad litem in Minnesota, as well, mostly in Ramsey County, and then also as a lawyer for children in abuse and neglect cases. And but here it's a combined role, and so I've served as that as well. And so whether it's in the criminal context or in abuse and neglect cases, those are the two main areas. Well, and quite frankly, in my roles in family law as well, were the main areas that I really saw what the needs of the people were, and how our judicial systems and quite frankly, our government systems can really infringe upon our rights and cause more damage to our freedoms than they are protecting those very freedoms. So basically for a long time, you know, I want to say, oh my gosh, I don't want to say that out loud. That sounds like a long time ago. 20 years now, I've been working in the legal field. I know I'm only looking like I'm 23, but
right on a Legally Blonde there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that movie was obviously about me. I don't have a little dog though. My dog's about 65 pounds and a little chunky. At any rate, for 20 years I've been in the legal field. Basically, God just put in my way all kinds of experiences and situations that I could understand exactly what people are going through and be able to be that strong advocate for people. And so what seemed like it might have been disjointed for me, because I'm a very organized person, I have a very, I don't know, streamlined method of trying to do things. I've never had a ton of resources available, so I like to be very resourceful and just get the job done as best I can, as quickly as I can. I can see now that that is what God was doing. He was giving me a sampling of what everyone needs in all those areas of their lives, and how all those different parts of our government are deficient, I guess you could say, at times, or oppressive.
You mean it's not just in Minnesota?
No, no, it's far worse in Michigan.
No,
far worse in, yeah, far worse in Illinois, which is a state I have to drive through to get between here and there. So no, there's some. I won't even go west. I don't even want to see California right now, or ever, probably. I mean, the San Andreas Fault can just do its thing. But anyway, so when these orders happened here in Michigan, the executive orders by our governor, we got to a point, by the time the Michigan Supreme Court declared her orders unconstitutional, she was up to 192 executive orders in the year 2020.
So now what's that look like on average for most, maybe you don't know, but I'm a funny feeling you probably did a little bit of research on that. So if 192 is obviously on the high end for 2020, by the time the decision came in, what's an average year look like for most governors in Michigan?
So I could tell you that from 1993 forward, you can view all of the Michigan governor's executive orders on the legislature's website. So that's my main context, because I can actually see the text of them. And so from 1993 through 2019, when Governor Whitmer was governor already, we had a total of 605 executive orders in that, 26-year span of time. 27.
Say that number one more time.
605 for all of those years.
In 26 years.
For between 1993 and 2019.
Okay.
So then just this year alone, now granted, I want to say maybe, we'll ballpark and say about 10 of those orders were actually constitutional orders, where she is allowed to, they're arguably constitutional. I actually haven't read them in detail, but the context of them had nothing to do with COVID-19. They were merely to reorganize the executive branch, and they were presented to the legislature with at least 60 days notice, which is what's required under our state constitution. So in theory, that's, you know, so, but what is it, like 94% of those orders, they were all COVID-19 orders, which were serving to rewrite laws and erase parts of the Constitution and control every aspect of our daily lives. So I knew I needed to do something about it. And to give you context, I'm just an average person. I mean, I'm stubborn, don't get me wrong, I'm Finnish, but I am, I work out of my house. I've had my law firm out of my house for, I don't know, 8 years or something like that. And so I don't have staff. My husband's a machinist, definitely not a, you know, traditional paralegal type, but of course I've put him to work when I need him. Just the same as I've put my 6-year-old to work as my legal secretary at times. Yeah, it's, in fact, if I could turn my computer right now, I could show you that all across my desk. I'm working on a brief right now, and it looks like my printer threw up all over my desk. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not some, you know, if people want to think of like some high-powered, overpriced attorney who always wears $500 suits, charges you, you know, $400 or $500 an hour, doesn't call people back, goes and plays golf and drinks a lot and whatever, right? The typical attorney personality or whatever. That's not me. I don't like most attorneys, especially the more I dig into the Constitution. So at any rate, the reason why I say all that is I'm just a normal person who was ticked off when my governor decided to start doing these orders in March. And I knew right from the beginning it was something ugly and awful. And it took most people a few weeks, if not a few months, to catch up to what I knew about it back in March. And by the end of April, I was asked to speak at a protest at the state capitol here in Michigan. And it was cold that day. And I was really nervous because, quite frankly, I did public speaking back in college, but speaking at Winona State or North Dakota State University or, you know, University of Manitoba or whatever, all those places that we had competition with back then, totally different scenario than standing on the steps of the Michigan State Capitol on April 30th in front of thousands of people, knowing that hundreds of them were going live on Facebook or YouTube at the time. Mm-hmm. So somehow, though, I made it through and didn't throw up and seemed to get all my sentences out, and actually held the captive attention of those thousands of people for 22 minutes straight, which shocks even me. And basically from there knew I had to do what I could to keep informing the people. The amount of questions I was getting following that were, you know, 12 times, 20 times more than what I had been getting in the previous 6 weeks or so. And they haven't slowed. I mean, I have thousands of emails I still haven't caught up on. I receive probably on average 5,000 or 6,000 text messages every month. And, you know, the phone calls, I don't even dare count those. So my goal is to really educate people. Now, what I will tell you, the reason why I said I thought I was a real advocate for the Constitution when I started this is because, well, I thought I was, but I realized that I was reading it, number one, not recognizing the areas that I really didn't know necessarily what they were, and really take the time to look things up. So for example, we had a recent law that was passed. 100% of those voted in favor of it. You'd think, oh, all the Democrats, all the Republicans, they all agree. The governor signed it. It's got to be a good bill. Actually, it's a load of crap. It's awful. I won't even go into the details right now, but it's entirely unconstitutional. In fact, it probably violates 15 or 20 provisions of the Constitution. And it took that bill for me to really look up something like the Bill of Attainder. You can't have a Bill of Attainder in the U.S. Constitution. You can't have it in the state Constitution. In fact, it's in each of those twice, at least in the U.S. Constitution twice. And I, quite frankly, just kind of, when I read it, I guess I always just went, oh, I don't really know what that means. I'll just gloss over that. And I think too many times that's what we do as Americans. We're a little bit lazy about really thinking about things or even admitting that we don't know them.
Right.
So at any rate, it's not until I really started hearing story after story after story, all the people that have called me and they're getting discriminated against because they medically can't wear a mask, or because, you know, they're not going to take all of the government's trying to shut them down because they won't do contact tracing of their customers or employees. because it violates their Fourth Amendment rights, or, you know, a variety of other things, right? And it's just in these several months that I've really honed in and started reading some of these provisions. I've been working on cases with a 501c3, mostly on nationwide cases. I think the very first one I worked on was a few years back when the state of Hawaii sued the Trump administration over the 7 countries that he was shutting down people from coming in from those countries, and they claimed it was a violation of the separation of church and state, as they call it, although that text is not in the Constitution. But at any rate, that was one of the very first ones I think I worked on in the United States Supreme Court. And so I've been more experienced, I guess you could say. My experience is longer than my expertise, if that makes any sense, because I didn't really start digging into these provisions until this COVID chaos unraveled. So I say that because I want people to recognize I'm no more special than the next person. I have my gifts and talents and abilities, which, yeah, I use in the area of law, but we have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Every single person in the United States needs to know how to read the Constitution, how to look up their laws. And if the laws are overly complicated, they need to not feel bad about not understanding them. They need to hold their government officials accountable for having such ridiculous and, quite frankly, unconstitutional laws on the books then.
Right.
So at any rate, I told you asked a loaded question. I'm not even sure if that touched all the bases of that question.
Somebody told, I was working on a book project. I was going to write about a murder here in this area, and I started interviewing people. And one of the people that was listening to the interview, after the post-interview audio, was like, "Wow, you're actually really good at this." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, you ask questions that get people to answer them." And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of the whole point of an interview, isn't it?" So, and so that's why I asked it the way I did, is because so much, Katherine, of what you're saying is not just your experience. Now, it's at the risk of running into logical fallacies and the appeal to authority, there's something that is a little bit more powerful when you're talking to an attorney who was just doing her thing, and all of a sudden she says to anyone who's listening, for lack of better terminology, I thought I knew the Constitution, and ultimately you're kind of hinting at this, I really didn't. I was, and that's part and parcel because our society as a whole, whether it be through education or experience, doesn't focus on it. It's this amorphous, ethereal thing that's out there, and it and it shows up in a movie, and it's protected by bulletproof glass and a fireproof system, and it's really not meant to be studied. It's not meant to be known. And as long as you're doing your job, and you're doing your job well, especially as an attorney, or whether you're in law enforcement or you're a legislator or on the executive branch, as long as you're doing your job well, the Constitution doesn't really matter. But boy, when you violate it, we'll know. Well, no, you won't. You won't know. And so here we sit in a situation where someone like you, who's frugal and organized, is saying, this stinks. Yep. And that's exactly where we need to be. It's actually the reason the Constitution exists. It doesn't exist for lawyers. What I think it was Franklin that said we should hang all the lawyers. Now, present company excluded, of course.
I'd hope so.
But there's a reason it exists, and it's not for the legal system. It's not for the attorneys. It's not for the judges. It's for us, and no one knows that. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because that's clear in hearing you now. Now, I listened to you and watched your arrest. And I was angry for a lot of reasons. But the thing that upset me the most was the lack of knowledge of the Constitution on the part of the arresting officers.
Blatant disregard. They never even cared to hear about it, let alone the statute, let alone the supposed township resolution that they thought was controlling. He literally, on the phone earlier that day, read it. When I was reading the statute, he just said a statute number. I looked it up and I was reading it, and he said, "You didn't finish reading the rest of that." And I said, "Yes, I did. It's only one sentence." He said, "No, you got to read the rest of the words." And he mentioned a few words, and I was like, what is he talking about? When I get there and there's this resolution, it references a state law. And he thought the sentence where it was referencing the state law was somehow the text of the state law itself. And I'm like, huh? And then he wasn't even reading that sentence the right way. So it was the blatant disregard of not only what the law is, but like not even like, I just don't want to hear, I don't care. I don't care. You gotta go. You don't have a right to be here. You gotta go.
Right.
And not even having an open mind to talking about it. The thing is, law enforcement officers are there for the people. They're there for the benefit of the people. If they're not, they gotta go. And if you're there for the benefit of the people, let's say you approach a situation where someone is truly out of line. They're not supposed to, they're somewhere they're not supposed to be, or they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. They don't have a right to do the thing that they're there doing. And it's your job as a law enforcement officer to respond to that. Then a true community, law enforcement officer, whether it's police department or college campus security or, state troopers, whatever, right? Definitely sheriffs, because those are more constitutional in nature. But you have all of those, any of those, when they go and arrive at a scene and they're talking to the accused, what they should be doing is seeing if they can, first of all, mediate the situation. Is there a way that they can bring things down a notch? Is there a way that they can turn things around so that everybody leaves following appropriate laws? I would dare say just the law, but following the law or not infringing upon the constitutionally protected rights of the others around them. And if there's a way that they can do that without using force, without using the heavy hand of the law, even a detention or, anything like that, let alone, a citation or a fine or anything like that. If they can just have a conversation and explain things to people and say, listen, you're here, let's use the trespass example. You're trespassing, such and such. Well, I have a right to whatever, free speech. Okay, well, in this scenario, you're actually on someone's private property and they have a right to enjoy their property without you infringing upon their right to do that. So let's look at, this is what the law says. The law says you have to have, basically notice that you're trespassing. You have to be asked to leave. So I'm asking you to leave, whatever, right? Having that conversation, explaining it to people, giving them context. If those officers, those sheriff's deputies in that moment with me, were trying to do the right thing in that regard and having that conversation with me, then they would have been open to hearing any of the, whether it's the township resolution, whether it's the state statute, the US or the Michigan constitutions, all of those are in my favor, not theirs.
Right.
So had they been in the frame of mind to have a conversation with me and trying to arrive at a mutually, workable place where we're all exercising our freedoms and no one's infringing upon the freedoms of the others involved, then they would have been of the mindset to listen and to hear what I was saying and even crack open the Constitution or, the state statutes and read them and go, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you do have a right to be here. Oh, yeah, you're well outside the 100-foot mark where you have to be beyond on election day. Okay, thanks, have a great day. That's how that conversation should have gone. I don't need a deputy to necessarily say to me, oh, you're so right, I'm so wrong, I've done it. I don't care, their ego could still have been preserved.
Mm-hmm.
It's about doing the right thing and having that conversation. So, and you brought up George Floyd you know, that was May, right?
Yeah, it feels like last year, but yeah, it was May.
I know. So that's a huge thing. And then there was, oh shoot, I'm gonna totally mess this up. I want to say Breonna Jackson.
Taylor,
It's not right.
Breonna Taylor
Taylor.
in Louisville, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't watched the news.
Oh, or was that Atlanta? I don't remember.
Somewhere down south. And I don't know the circumstances of that at all. I just happened to be out at an event and happened to see TV for the first time in a long time, and I was seeing it scrolling in, you know, little sections on the bottom of the TV. So I'm not that educated on it, but from what I understand, the situation in Minnesota was an individual who was clearly violating the law. The situation down south, whatever state that was, with her, is my understanding is that she was not violating any laws. And then her life was cut short in a way that was totally not appropriate. I mean, it was not some sort of self-defense on behalf of the law enforcement officials involved.
That's actually a really interesting, the Breonna Taylor one is actually very interesting. And as busy as you are, I'm not going to suggest that you sink your teeth into that one, because I could already tell that if I tell you you might want to sink your teeth into that one, you'd probably come away with a mouthful, because it's actually, you bring up the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor, and this is how we live our lives, and it actually goes to how we address constitutional matters. We do everything in sound bites today. We do everything by optics today. So however it looks to us as we're perceiving it in the moment, we are going to say, oh, that's wrong, or oh, well, that was right. And there's no contemplation, there's no intellect, there's no engaging of powers of reasoning or even deduction anymore. We're fed something, we take it in, and we immediately regurgitate a reaction. And I think that's really how we end up where we're at now with those two cases, even though they're not related specifically to COVID. Those two cases say a lot about how our society operates. And that's why we can come into the beginning of 2019, everybody kind of joking about, oh, it's 2020, and it's, there's something in people's eyes and minds. It's kind of a mystic, oh, 2020, it's going to be mystical and magical. Boy, it sure has been something. But if you would have, in January 1st of this year, said, well, by November 17th, a relatively unknown attorney in Michigan is going to go toe-to-toe with the governor of Michigan and clean her clock over unconstitutional executive orders that violate the people's constitutional authority, by the way, not the governor's constitutional authority, but the people's constitutional authority, and has stripped them of so many different liberties. People would have laughed at you, let alone telling them that you were going to be ordered to wear a mask everywhere you go. Oh, and by the way, and you can't gather in your own home with more than 10 people. And now in the case of Minnesota, we're being told, and it's coming this week, you watch, after the press conference yesterday, you can't have anybody from outside of your home in your home. Oh, and no, like right now, the way it sits, you can't even have 3 different households together in one place. And people would have laughed at you and said, you're just being a conspiracy theorist, and you're a crackpot, and you watch too much Alex Jones, and you need to get the tinfoil off your windows and live a little. But here we sit, having a conversation with, there again, I'm a nobody. I'm like, well, I just hit 175 subscribers on my YouTube channel, so I'm making strides day by day. But I'm a nobody. Nobody has, but now guess, and you said something too that I can relate with, is you said after that speech at the Michigan State Capitol, people started asking you questions. Almost like, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, people heard me as we were building up to this well before the shutdowns came. I was telling people, watch, here's what's coming. This is coming. And then all of a sudden the shutdown started coming, and people are coming up to me quietly going, how did you know that was going to happen? What do you think is going to happen now? To the point where they don't want me to say anything because they think it's my fault now. Because every time I say something, it happens. So
can you say that I get to go on a vacation or better yet, move to the beach of Florida? If you're the crystal ball.
I will try to speak that into your life, sister.
Okay.
But
because after 10 years of Minnesota winters and now back here 12 years of Michigan winters again, I'm out.
You're ready for a white sand beach and not a snowbank. Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask this, and I'm gonna ask this question, and it's gonna be a little loaded too, but it's meant to be. I'm asking a leading question, so if you want to object, that's fine. Because then I want to build into the amendment issue. Because go ahead.
You said something I want to. So the reason why, for two things, the reason why I brought up those two instances of the Minnesota case and the Southern case is to show two ends of the spectrum with how, we have law enforcement officers. Whether those two cases truly are good examples of this or not is a different story, but how the media has perceived them, right?
Right, thank you.
So we have law enforcement officers that are out there busting their butts every single day, doing what they need to do, and getting a bad rap, having even at times courts tell them that they have no right to defend themselves when somebody is, has a gun or is threatening them or is coming after them with a knife or whatever the situation is. And so we've been, especially our Democrat governors have really been hammering on, and of course it's in all these commercials. It's in every episode now of my favorite show that I've watched for 17 years, Grey's Anatomy, and some of these other things where it's like, we have these frontline workers, right? They're being advertised as the nurses and the doctors and, people like that. Well, what about our law enforcement officers that are really the frontline workers and have been for decades and decades and decades, that, whether it's in a small town and they don't come across a, big, scary or terrible incident very frequently, but yet it nevertheless happens, yep. Or whether they're in a community like Minneapolis, which I've lived in, one of the high-rise apartments on the top floor in Minneapolis at one point in my life, or I've lived in Orlando, in not one of the best areas, crime statistics wise, but
I was going to say, what part of Orlando?
Well, where I originally lived was not too bad. You woke up and on my way to high school, go to the bus stop, and I would just smell orange groves. I mean, if that's not bliss when it's 75 degrees and you don't ever have to wear a winter coat, I don't know what is. But my
friend Roger in Orlando will appreciate that. So.
Well, it doesn't smell like orange groves in Orlando anymore. They took all the orange groves out and put in a bunch of malls. There's now more malls than there are high schools. That's pretty sad. But anyways, that's not what it used to be. But so my point is that you have, whether it's in a small town or big town, there's dangers that our law enforcement officials have in a variety of respects and are out on the front lines. And so we need to encourage the due respect for those individuals that are out there doing the right thing and truly upholding the Constitution, because they have an oath of office. Mm-hmm. They swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. And then, I'm not saying we should disrespect those who are in, before I go on to those other professions, then we have the other side to that, where you have the law enforcement officials, like the three grown men, decently sized deputies who manhandled me so much. Ooh, I wonder if it'll show. Give me a second here.
Did you ever bruise, by the way?
Huh.
Oh, you did, didn't you?
So this is 2 weeks later. I don't know if you can see this.
I can, yep, here. I can.
So I have fingerprints. I'm not sure if it'll show, but I have like a green mark that goes around, and then even green. Oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. Green right here. So yeah, it's pretty nice.
Wow.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, that shows it much better. Well, not
2 weeks
better.
later. 2 weeks later, and
2
that's
weeks
not the
ago
only
today.
one.
2 weeks ago today, by the way, wasn't it? Yeah.
2 weeks ago today.
Arrested
Yes.
and charged and elected all in one day. It's amazing.
Yeah, my new hashtag is arrested, then elected.
Oh, you froze. Did we lose you?
At any rate, though, those are individuals. They need to be, well, and the case has only gotten worse from there. I'll have to go into that at some other point, but and you know I will. I'll do a video on it, talking all about it. But those individuals, they didn't just do that to me. In fact, I wasn't even there that day until I got a phone call that I had volunteers that were threatening to be arrested for lawfully and constitutionally circulating a petition. And I drove out there to help them. And I thought, again, it's going to be a conversation. We're going to be able to have a discussion, me, you know, with the law enforcement officer, because over the phone, it was not quite making any sense. And so I figured, no problem, face to face, we'll talk this out. I'll bring with me a paper that has, in fact, here's a copy right here. That day I brought with me, I typed this up before I left, but I know you can't really read it all, but I have all the constitutional provisions and onto the back, statutory provisions, constitutional provisions. And in fact, there's no cases on here. There's no editorializing. It's literally just quoting the, you know, what the law and what the Constitution requires. And so I brought extra copies with me so my volunteers could each have one. I could have one, the township clerk, you know, whatever officers are responding, because I'm thinking we're going to be able to have a conversation. The law's on my side. How could this possibly go wrong? So, and they didn't, it's not like they knew who I was. I mean, I actually admittedly had a t-shirt on that said Restore Freedom with Katherine Henry on it, but they didn't know that I was Katherine Henry, or probably even what Restore Freedom with Katherine Henry is all about, let alone that I'm the constitutional attorney that drafted the very petition we were there circulating that day. They had no clue about any of those things. And I didn't want them to, because what does it matter? They shouldn't stop arresting me or stop listening to me, or excuse me, start listening to me simply because I'm an attorney.
Or who you are.
They should treat me the same exact way they treat everybody else, and they did. And that is horrible. And they will be made an example of, because they should be. Because everyone in Michigan, quite frankly, everybody in the US, they need to know they're going to be safe going out into their communities. So we need to figure out a way to support the law enforcement officials that are doing the right thing, while holding all the other ones that don't do the right thing, holding them accountable. But let's be honest, it's not just law enforcement officials. Every single government official in any branch of government, by Article 6 of our US Constitution, is required to take an oath of office to support and uphold the US Constitution. Most states also have a similar requirement. Ours is Article 11, Section 1 of our state constitution. We even have state statutes like MCL 15.151 that says if you're any kind of agent or employee for the government of any kind here in Michigan, you likewise have to take the same oath. So when I have people that just tell me, this is the thing I hear most often about any of these discriminatory practices, I'm just following orders. I'm just doing what I was told. Well, my boss said, well, guess what? I don't care who you are. If you're violating the Constitution, I don't care what your boss said or who you think your boss is, you are going to be on the hook. Well, they might be on the hook too, but you are going to be on the hook, because especially if you work for the government, you took an oath to uphold the US and Michigan constitutions. And it doesn't matter if they remembered that they took the oath or not.
And as important as something like qualified immunity is, qualified immunity goes out the window when you start violating constitutional rights and the fundamental core of what it means for the citizen to be a citizen. And that's the thing that, and I've had that conversation with so many people right now. You know, when somebody looks at you and says they're just following orders, you need to be afraid, because that's a sign of a society and a culture that is on the downward slope. When they're willing to stand up and go, I realize that what I'm doing is wrong, but I'm following orders, so I'm okay. That's terrifying.
It didn't work in the Nuremberg trial, so it shouldn't work here.
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up, because this is going to take me to the next phase of this, and I'll address one part afterwards. But so we look at the Constitution. Most people have never even read the main body of the Constitution. They know a little bit about the Bill of Rights, and they have some idea of where they come from, if there's not some misunderstanding of what the Bill of Rights means. Of course, everybody says, well, I have these rights because the Constitution gives them to me, which of course the Constitution doesn't say. In fact, it says the very opposite, that it just enumerates and delineates those rights.
Actually, can you pause on that for a second? Because that's a very important point.
Yeah.
So in our, give me a second here, it's somewhere. Our United States Constitution, well, I'm going to get the actual Constitution. I've got 3 constitutions in front of me. So the United States Constitution says, amongst other things, of course, that we, the people of the United States, in order to secure the blessings of liberty, not create blessings of liberty, secure the blessings of liberty that were given to us by God, that we do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So we the people, not a bunch of attorneys, not a bunch of Republicans and Democrats, not a bunch of politicians or lobbyists, we the people, the everyday average people, are creating this very Constitution to secure the blessings that God gave us. And the Declaration of Independence is very clear. We institute governments among men to secure the blessings of freedom. So what's interesting, though, is that, and I haven't read every single constitution, state constitution across the United States. In fact, I haven't read most of them. But what I do know is that in the beginning of most of them, at least the ones that I have looked at, I don't recall anything that really hammered on the point of God gave us our liberties and government's job is just to protect those liberties. That's the whole foundation of what government is there to do. But so by the time I really studied and got into the Michigan Constitution, I've been hammering on for people that we have one of the best state constitutions here in Michigan, because our preamble literally says, we, the people of the state of Michigan, Almighty God for the blessings of freedom, and earnestly desiring to secure these blessings undiminished to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. And then it goes right into Article 1 in the state constitution for Michigan is literally called Declaration of Rights. And Article 1, Section 1 says that all political power is inherent in the people. And so reminding myself of the Minnesota Constitution, because it's been a while since I've practiced there. The preamble of the Minnesota Constitution, it says that we, the people of the state of Minnesota, grateful to Almighty God for our civil and religious liberty and desiring to perpetuate its blessings and secure the same to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. Quite frankly, aside from some synonyms, is word for word the same as the Michigan Constitution. And if you look at Article 1, it doesn't say Declaration of Rights, it just calls it a Bill of Rights. And Article 1, Section 1 is the object of government. And it says government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people, which is the second sentence of the Michigan Constitution, in whom all political power is inherent. Yes. Together with the right to alter, modify, or reform government whenever required by the public good. So again, the political power is inherent in we, the people. It says so in the very first section of our state constitution here in Michigan, says so in the very first section of the state constitution there in Minnesota. And, you know, so I think it's important to remember that and to look at it from the concept of our United States Constitution was drafted before the state constitutions. And it says what it needs to say. It said definitely what they thought it needed to say. They never would have thought that we would have been in a year where governors would try to order or mandate the breathing of air through masks 24 hours a day, or that you'd have to write down for the government every single time you went to a store or a restaurant or, a government building. Those things are just so absurd. No one would ever seen them coming. But if you think about it, as time went on and government got more and more corrupt and grew bigger, these state constitutions then had been developed along the way where they, built upon what's in the US Constitution, and they made the wording even more poignant and more clear and straight and to the point, like, God gave us our freedom, people. We, the people, are here to utilize and protect the God-given freedom, and we're going to make this government here in our state to do that. And so I just think it's really awesome. And even if people don't think about anything else for the day, but they watch your video today or whenever this ends up being, and they go, I'm going to go read that preamble of my state constitution.
Right. That
by itself would be huge.
Worth you taking such a chunk of time to talk to a nobody from Minnesota. here's the thing is, what ends up happening, and I know you know this, that people look at the 10th Amendment and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it open in front of me, but you look at the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which says that all powers not clearly delineated to the federal government are reserved to the state government and the people. And people forget the people part, and they literally focus on all those powers being delineated to the state government. What they miss in that is that it doesn't say that the states can do whatever they want. It has to follow what the Constitution has already laid out. So the state doesn't get to come in and say, well, we're going to do all of these things because we reserve these rights to ourselves.
Well, that and the 10th Amendment, not to be a smartass, but it purposely comes right after the 9th Amendment. And the 9th Amendment
say that.
comes before, because it's saying, so we've listed all these rights so far, which are super important and need to be in here.
Yes.
But we could go on in eternity listing all the rights that God gave us, and we don't need to do that because at some point people need to rub two brain cells together and figure some of these things out for themselves.
Exactly.
So we have the unenumerated rights that cannot be diminished or disparaged at all simply because they remain unenumerated. And after that, we say, okay, so then whatever power is not given to the federal government is given to the state government or to the people, keeping in mind that you can't infringe upon any of our God-given, constitutionally protected freedoms.
Whether they're delineated or not.
Right, and so even before we had the 14th Amendment, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. I'm pretty sure that says that you can't, it applies the, I'm gonna double check myself here. Well, yeah, okay. That applies the protections of the Constitution specifically to state government action. Before we had that, we still had Article 6 of the US Constitution, which is the Supremacy Clause. Mm-hmm. And it said that, and I just want to read those words exactly because, even paraphrasing it sometimes does an injustice to it, that the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or the laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So they're saying you can have a state constitution, you can have state laws, but if you have something in that state constitution or those state laws that violates this US Constitution, it's not good. This is the supreme law of the land. So this was always there. Quite frankly, with this, I don't understand why they felt like they needed to spell it out in the 14th Amendment, other than they were starting to realize how, corrupt. Dumb government can be. So
you're nicer than I am. I was just going to say corrupt. So
that too. And up until recently, say the last 10 years, you could argue that they were just dumb in thinking that people would ever let them get away with it. But now we see, well, no, I guess they're not dumb because people are letting them get away with it. So then that they're just corrupt, and that's just the end of it. But all the more reason why people need to stand up and do something about it. And am I done fighting cases? Well, no, I'm actually, my little list over there of my, I just, reevaluated my priorities, last week and figured out exactly what I need to be working on. And I do have several key cases I need to file and work on, but one of them, none of them can really do what the whole rest of my plan is really set there to do, which is to not be the one leading the charge on fixing this for the people. And no matter how smart people are, no matter how hardworking they are, the common denominator is people think, well, if we just file this kind of lawsuit in this kind of court for this case, it'll finally fix X, Y, Z. Judges don't give us our rights. And quite frankly, a lot of judges have done a lot of stupid things in every single court, state and federal, all the way up to the US Supreme Court. In fact, in preparing for this brief I'm writing today, I was reading a case that has been trumpeted as this huge First Amendment, rights case. And in reading it, liberty can only be exercised in a system of law which safeguards order. Well, no, we don't get our liberty because we have government there to protect it. We institute government for the purpose of protecting those liberties, but we certainly can have liberty without having government. And it's, we reaffirm our conviction that freedom and viable government are indivisible concepts. Oh, so glad that government is just, like that important that we're, well, that, and you see, this, really, I mean, not a single case has ever even commented negatively or criticized this case, right? This is from 1965 in the United States Supreme Court, where they are calling, where they say things like, the constitutional command of free speech and assembly is basic and fundamental, so important to the preservation of the freedoms treasured in a democratic society. And I'm like, huh. Now I'm pretty sure Article 4, Section 4 of our US Constitution spells out that we have a republican form of government. So maybe a constitutional republic, perhaps, but not just a democracy. So anyway, they get it wrong. And so if our judges and our justices are going to get it wrong on, quite frankly, more cases than not, I don't want to put all my eggs in the judicial basket for them to somehow fix our freedom problem. What I want to do is empower and enlighten and educate and encourage all of the people to have those tools to stand up and just live their lives and exercise their freedoms, and then even get to the point of, making sure charges are brought against these government officials so that something is done. So I have some really great treats in store in the next, near future.
Don't tease me like that, because that means I'm just going to ask you for another interview.
Well, I'll tell you. So I'm working on a constitutional app. At this point, it's going to be mostly Michigan and US Constitution based with, some annotations and breakdowns that make it so that you could be in the moment, you could be confronted with law enforcement and, need to check, oh my gosh, is this, I thought I had a right to be here, and check and go, oh, my bad. No, I guess nope, sorry, officer. Nope, I'll leave. Or, nope, I'm pretty sure it says, and be able to hold your ground. We also, I'm working on, really that goes hand in hand with that, a print book. Get this, for the last several months.
Wait, did you say a print book?
A print book.
What is this print book that you?
The Constitution.
But what is printing? I don't.
Like this.
Oh, okay.
Like actually printed versus just the app. But I actually sell, not this one, this is back in my days of law school, but I sell ones that are that small, just at cost, whatever I can get them for. plus the cost to then put a stamp on it and mail it out to people. And I've sold hundreds, if not thousands. I think it's still in the hundreds, but at any rate, just in the last few months alone. And it's just the US Constitution, and people are hungry for it and they want to know, and they don't even necessarily know where to get a copy. And granted, you can get a free copy at many places, but you know, the time is now. And if you're not standing right in front of a booth somewhere where they're handing free constitutions out, you need to order one now, right? So, which is great. And then I've had people asking me about the state constitution. Now, keep in mind, my website, restorefreedomkh.com, people can go into the documents or resources tab, and the US and Michigan constitutions are there in full PDFs. But, you know, people like to have something that they can carry around with them.
Yep, absolutely.
So this is what the Michigan Constitution looks like, and it's in book form, and you know, it's big, but it's also something that we can't really get. You have to go and get that through the legislature, basically get it one at a time kind of thing. And so I thought, this is ridiculous. So
I was just going to say, that's ridiculous.
I went to Amazon. I'm like, well, somebody sells it somewhere, right? Sure, you can get it no less than $10 a copy to get the Michigan State Constitution in print form. And I'm like, $10 a copy? So
for something that's yours.
Yeah. So I'm going to be working then with the app, with the print book. We're actually doing an audio book too. And then we'll have it available through our website behind like a password protected sign up thing. So people in theory will be able to like sign in, and then they'll be able to make their own notes or highlight whatever different areas to kind of study the Constitution. And so we'll be annotating so that when I talk about your right to bear arms under the Second Amendment of the US Constitution, I'm talking about your right to bear arms under Article 1, Section 6 of our Michigan Constitution or whatever. So at any rate, when I do all that, we're going to be able to do a print book. I don't know what the final costs will be. I just have some vague estimates right now from some printing companies. But the goal will be fairly soon to get all these products out there. So we'll have a print book available for people. We'll have the, that has our state constitution, the US Constitution we already have available. And then we'll have the app and, you know, a searchable, whatever app. We'll have the online on our website behind the password protected area and an audio book. We have a really cool TV idea-ish, like kind of like the Blaze Network, but with a bunch of real people that have real expertise to bring. Not that I am saying Glenn Beck doesn't have any expertise, but just that it's a bunch of real people that I know that are actually doctors and chiropractors and epidemiologists and all people in their field. I have PPE experts and a sheriff and other law enforcement and just people, real people who do real things and who want to advocate for truth and true justice. And to you. Kind of what's that?
I love you. You're amazing.
So to be able to have a segment 1 hour per week where everyone is, you can tune in on Thursdays at 8 and see Katherine Henry talk about constitutional law, or you can tune in Tuesdays at 8 and see Kristen Megan talking about PPE, whatever. So really giving people truth about what's happening, because COVID's not going away anytime soon.
No.
Government corruption's not going away anytime soon. No. Government corruption relating to COVID is definitely not going away anytime soon.
Thank you for that encouragement. That was awesome.
That is not going away anytime soon.
That's what I needed today, Katherine. So I'm glad you brought all of that stuff up. And now I'm gonna see if I can bring this back, not because all of that's going to be incredibly important to the two-part question, the two amendment question. So we all know what the First Amendment says. We think we know what it says. We think we know what it means. And you already referenced that wall of separation, of course, non-existent in the Constitution. it's a letter to the Danbury Baptist of Danbury, Connecticut, and has been now insinuated into every situation that anybody can think of, and flipped from what Jefferson meant when he wrote it in the first place. But you take the First Amendment and you look at the Ninth Amendment, and if I'm correct, you had said a couple of things that were somewhat related to the Ninth Amendment. One, your freedom to not wear a mask does not need to show up in any of the other amendments because you can lean on the Ninth Amendment. And then what comes along with that is when a state, when a governor or someone else steps up and says, I am making this mandate, I am making this edict, this dictum from on high that says that all of my subjects will wear facial coverings anytime they're in public and can't social distance or inside of a building, and then says that it's on the shoulders of the business owner or the management or the employees of the business. They are no longer functioning as individual private businesses, but as extensions of the government's order. So that means they are now beholden to things like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and in this case, the Ninth Amendment in particular. Can you flesh that out for me in a way that stupid people like me will understand that? And I know you got to go, but is there a way for us to understand that? Because how do you look at the clerk at Lowe's who's refusing to do business with you because you don't have a mask on and go, actually, you don't have that authority as a vassal of, or not a vassal, but as a representative of the state. You don't have that authority.
So that's probably a discussion that I would not be able to squeeze in to even just a few moments.
Nope, that's fine.
But I do need to go into it more, and I will when going into the mask mandate issue, definitely. But in fact, I was thinking as you were describing that, I wish I would have seen that question coming, because there.
I told you I watch your videos.
Well, I didn't, sometimes people say that, and they'll even say, oh, I've watched all of them. And I'm like, you've watched all 175 videos? And I just look at them like, what? And they're like, oh no, I saw 3. And I was like, there's more than 3. So
I haven't watched all of your videos, but I watch your videos. And it's funny because it's normally right along the lines of something I just went through myself. It's.
So,
here, let's do this. You can't flesh this out in a couple of minutes. There's no way. And maybe if time presents itself, we can have a conversation again, if it works.
But I think the very thing okay, so I'm assuming that anybody, I guess I didn't even ask, is that, how do you share this? How are people going to see this? I assume just online.
Well, predominantly on YouTube. I'm probably going to I'm going to start a Rumble and a BitChute because I have a funny feeling YouTube's coming for me pretty soon. So,
well, if they're coming for you, they're probably coming for me. But
yeah, you're far more powerful than I am, so they can get rid of me easier than they can get rid of you. But so it'd be like Rumble, Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube, and then I'll share it on, to my Facebook friends, and so like 10 people will watch. So.
So, okay. Well, if you, I guess if you want to share it with me somehow, when it comes out, what I would like to do is, I guess if you want to put at the bottom, just share like whatever the YouTube like name is or whatever, where it came from. What I'd like to do is upload it to my YouTube so that everybody can see. I like to connect people. I've got people all over the world that actually follow me now, and it's kind of crazy, but it's kind of cool. In fact, a guy in Scotland said they need an attorney like me over there. It's about a month ago, and he said something like, I'm the queen of badassery. And my husband he like heard that in a Scottish accent kind of way.
Sean
and
Connery.
I was like, that's kind of funny. Yeah, it's a Sean Connery moment, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll send it to you in an email. And then I'll make sure that my channel's on there so that people can see it.
So So here to answer, so without being able to answer you about the case law about that, actually, let me back up and say the true answer.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So so I am correct in understanding that once they act as agents of the state enforcing a governor's mandate, they now are obligated to adhere to the very Constitution that protects me from them doing what they're doing.
Yeah, but let's look at it this way. Yes, in fact, I do want to talk about that because this is important. In fact, it might be, so just hang in there with me for a second because
you're fine.
There's a case from down south that I was reading today, and well, that sucks. So I don't know exactly where it is, but it basically, so the case was about, there were, I don't know how many now because all the facts are somewhere in one of these cases, but there were, let's say there were two, I want to say it was two Black men walked into an establishment, might have been a restaurant, I'm not quite sure. And they were, refusing to leave. And what it was is they were, the words of the case, I mean, it's verbatim a mask theory case. They were refusing to, they were violating the requirements of a local ordinance or state statute that required segregation. And because of that, they ended up being trespassed and arrested for and charged with trespass, criminal trespass. And the case came out and said that violates their due process. And so to the extent that you can be charged with trespassing merely because you show up and you're in a place of public accommodation and you have a skin color someone doesn't like, or you walk with a cane or a walker, obviously, 99% of Americans are going to go, well, duh, you can't discriminate based on that. Now think about it, you can't discriminate based on that, yet those are private entities we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So Menards can't discriminate based on that. Well, Menards certainly can't discriminate then based on the religious or medical needs of people who won't or can't wear masks. So I, for example, have a medical reason why I can't wear a mask. I also have a medical reason why those around me can't be wearing masks because I read lips, which is why when I do Zoom calls, I'm constantly not looking at the camera when somebody else is speaking because I need to read their lips while they're speaking. That not only that, I have a strong religious conviction that wearing masks is, goes opposite to what God is calling us to do, to be in fellowship with one another, to demonstrate, freely show that we are made in his image, all of those things. And so you can't live in community with one another if you literally are not living in a community because you're locking yourselves in your homes, you're not having Thanksgiving dinner, and you're not allowed to sit at a restaurant together, and you're not allowed to even show your face outside of a mask or any of those things. So, or even putting in sound barriers, a face shield for me actually stops me from communicating with people almost as much as the mask issue does. So for Menards to discriminate based on any of that, it's obvious that they can't discriminate based on, one of those other examples I gave. So why they think, and why a lot of people think that they can discriminate based on these situations is insane. And you can't be trespassed. If you can't be trespassed for one, you can't be trespassed for another. But more importantly, getting back to something else, we were talking about with those unenumerated rights. Again, and this will go back to learning the Constitution in the first place, but the Minnesota Constitution which if you are in Michigan, in Minnesota, that's really hard for me. I don't know why. When I first moved here, I said Minnesota all the time, and I had to correct myself to say Michigan, and now I'm saying Michigan when I'm trying to say Minnesota. But then it sounds backwards. So anyway, if you go to the revisor's website, revisor.mn.gov/constitution, you can actually pull up the most recent version of the state constitution there in Minnesota. And Article 1, Section 16 it's got a lot jam-packed into it, but it says the enumeration of rights in this constitution shall not deny or impair others retained by and inherent in the people. I might even argue that's even better wording than our state constitution here in Michigan, Article 1, Section 23. They also blend then the right to religious freedom, the right of every man to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience shall never be infringed. And then nor shall any control of or interference with the rights of conscience be permitted. And so I think that's really important because, especially in Minnesota, ours isn't quite worded exactly like that. And I think those few 3 or 4 words that I just added at the end there that are part of Article 1, Section 16 of the Minnesota State Constitution really demonstrate, well, not only that it's our entire government premised upon God and the rights that God gave us, but that, you know, we truly have the right to have that religious freedom that cannot be diminished or abrogated or impaired or denied in any way. So, and not even interfered with, according to the language here of the Minnesota Constitution. So anyway, it's, I think it's very important. Something else that's important that goes to executive orders, because is that what's happening in Minnesota largely is executive orders?
It's all executive orders. Yeah.
Okay, so I forgot, I don't even know anymore who the governor of Minnesota is, but you're a dummy. I hope you watch this at some point because you're a dummy and you need to learn how to read.
He's heard that. Trust me, he's heard that a few times.
Well, you need to hear it again. So
Governor Walz, that was for you. I second it. But
so just like the Michigan Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, Article 3, Section 1 of the Minnesota Constitution says that the powers of government shall be divided into 3 distinct departments: legislative, executive, and judicial. I mean, that seems like, duh, we know this, we learned that in school, but no, it's legit and it's important. No person or persons belonging to or constituting one of these departments shall exercise any of the powers properly belonging to either of the others, except in the instances expressly provided in this Constitution, which is almost word for word what our Michigan State Constitution says. And then it talks about the different, the different departments and essentially who does what. So the, oh, look at that. They even have an oath of office to, let's see, support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state. That's very interesting. Anyway, all that you can read in a very few quick minutes. Too bad the governors can't figure out how to do that. The reason why those are important is that if you get, say, 4 takeaways or so from this conversation, one that's really important is that government, a lot of people, I went into Outback Steakhouse the other night and I love their steak, phenomenal steak. And they have them, in every state that I've lived in, they've had an Outback. So I can learn to rely on it. Even when I go to Cocoa Beach, Florida, they have an Outback, not that far away. I go in and sit down, not in the Cocoa Beach one recently, but one over here in Michigan. And we go there so often. I know, when babies have been born, I know when people have gotten married, I know their staff. And they were pretty much like all brand new staff there one night and a brand new manager. And he was harassing me the entire meal. Like there were points where he was just standing over top of us staring because he didn't even know what to say anymore. But he was literally saying things like, well, but it's a law that you have to wear a mask. It's a law that you have to give us your full name and phone number and all of this contact information. And I'm like, it is not a law. And I tried to very carefully explain that to him. And I even got to the point of, let's pull up this government garbage. I have it printed somewhere on my desk. But anyway, the most recent, well, now it's not the most recent. At the time, it was, from October 29th was the most recent order. Anyway, that, says that you have to wear masks and provide your phone number and all that. And so I was reading it to him. So even if we want to pretend that this order has legal authority, I'm reading it to him and describing for him that even according to the terms of the order, there's exemptions and all this other stuff. And he just had this look on his face and said, but the government says we have to do this, so you have to do it. And it was just this like dumbfounding, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to like smack it out of him to go, this is like Plato's allegory of the cave. Dude, you're in the cave, dude. You're seeing like a distant shadow. You haven't even gotten to the stage of seeing a candle, let alone the actual light of the outside world. Wake up. And I felt so sorry for him because I realized at some point in there that I can't possibly ever communicate with him until he's literally had years to understand more about our government.
Right.
And that's the thing that I wanted people to take away, that these are not simply words on a page. This is not a living, breathing document like they teach in all the law schools basically across the nation that they put on the media. No, this is a contract that cannot be changed but for a written agreement to change it, which in the United States, by the consent of all the parties.
Yep.
And so, when you look at who has the authority to make a law or a regulation for the people, it is never the executive branch.
Never.
The executive branch and the judicial branch are not in the position to start making rules and regulations for people. So any executive order in any state, all across the US, no executive official should ever and does not have the authority to make rules and regulations for the people. So they can make rules and regulations typically to reorganize within their own executive branch. President Trump can make whatever kind of regulations he wants to rein in the executive branch that he has that is full of thousands, if not millions of employees, right? He could do all kinds of things in that regard. But the moment he steps outside of that and starts regulating we the people,
right,
is the same as any of these governors. They don't have that authority. And so when you asked me that question about, when private businesses start acting as an arm of the state, a lot of that is simply explained or more clearly explained through some of the case law on point. Problem is, justices and judges everywhere call it case law. There is no such thing.
Right.
Case law does not exist. Judges are not allowed to make laws. They are there simply to interpret the law and apply it to a given situation. So to the extent that we have, in fact, in one of these cases, it was talking that I was working on for my brief today. They were talking about the United States Supreme Court and the Michigan Supreme Court. They're talking about how, you could have laws that are regulating the people in their ability to exercise their First Amendment rights. And that you can do that only if, it's sufficiently, tailored, it's narrowly tailored, and it's all this other stuff, right? But when you do that, in some instances, basically courts, this was a United States Supreme Court case that was talking about that state courts then will often, I forget the wording that they said. It was very interesting and it made the point very clear, but basically that the state courts get very creative in basically modifying the statutes. So they're not reading the statutes as they're written. They're modifying them so they could still be used to regulate the people, even though they're blatantly unconstitutional, but they're trying to save them so they can still be used against the people.
Yep.
And so what's interesting is whether they're doing that, whether they're modifying state laws that way, or whether they're entirely creating new laws, that's not okay. And it's not constitutional. So it's just really important that we remember some of these so basic foundational things, because, and here's the thing I was going to say about the reason why I thought of myself as someone who might really know the Constitution, and then realized more and more that I did not. I mean, it really struck me in these last few months, looking back at my years of law school, which is kind of a long time ago now. So maybe I, forgot a thing or two, but it's not particular just to the law school that I went to in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's everywhere. In law school, you don't just learn the law and start with the Constitution and go from there. You actually learn in your first year of law school, what they're really doing is teaching you about the history, which I get that. Okay, so the history, basically cases that came out of England, and how, whether it's property or contracts or whatever, it's cases that came out of England and came over to the, and then as people came over to the US and the years went by, things kind of changed and morphed, and how we got to the state of things today. And for a historical perspective, that's fine. But we don't ever just start with, and so here's the Constitution. So when you have constitutional law 1, that's usually powers, and then constitutional law 2, that's liberties, it's all about the cases. What cases have been out there, and not in the context of, give me a scenario that we can talk about and see how the language of the Constitution applies. No, it's, let's talk about a situation that happened and look at what the court in that case said about the language of the Constitution. And that's all that law school is.
Yep.
Even when you study family law, which is almost entirely all done in statutes.
Right.
It's not just read the statutes and go from there. It's, well, here's a statute.
Case upon
Now
case.
here's cases that talk about the statute. And it's important that we recognize not simply how, a case is, a law is applied to a particular set of facts, but what are the rules of law that a judge pronounced in that particular decision that we then add to this big body of law that we have.
Right.
So don't buy into it.
You have to go, we all, that and there again, that's the thing. And well, I'll say one more thing and let you end with some admonition for us so that you can get back to work. The biggest hindrance to the we the people aspect is we the people have subjugated ourselves willingly to the same mindset that manager at Outback has, which is, oh, well, the government said so, I have to. And it's specifically happening to us because we have relegated things like civics in school to a bygone era where it's not important. And so people look at you as if you're some sort of four-headed freak when you start to talk about the Constitution because, well, we all know it exists, like I said earlier. And it has left people unable, even though they can feel in the very core of their American being that something's off. They've been fed this line that the government would never do anything like this that would violate the Constitution. And we know that that's not true because Governor Walz, in his most recent executive order, added at the bottom, after he gave permission to the Attorney General, county attorneys, and city attorneys to prosecute people who even threaten to disobey him. I'm not even kidding you. He gave them the power to investigate them and then charge them up to $25,000 for being investigated, for threatening to disobey. At the bottom of that, underneath that, he said, nothing in this executive order should be understood as to give permission to law enforcement or anyone else, or imply that law enforcement or anyone else is allowed to violate the constitutional rights of an American citizen. they put that in there because they know what they're doing is wrong, and it gives them an out. We didn't intend to violate your rights.
But
So
they do.
they do. Like, so a brief admonition, and I mean that as brief as you want it to be. And when you finish, I'm gonna say my goodbye now and tell you thank you, and hopefully we could talk again at a time where we've all won. And so a brief admonition, and once again, Katherine, thank you so much for your time. My tens and tens of viewers are going to appreciate this.
Sorry, that was really funny. Hey, if it makes you feel any better, I'm only popular, if you will, right now, on, first of all, very tiny scale, really. But a year ago this month, I will tell you that I uploaded my very first video, and I recorded it like 30 different versions because I wanted to get all 60 seconds perfect. And finally uploaded my very first video about my business and mediation to Facebook. And so a year ago, I remember thinking, I posted it and I got 1 like and then 2 likes. It was into March, I finally got 100 likes on that video. It took until March of this year to get 100 likes on one single video, one post of a video. So, and then I didn't, I had maybe like 200 people follow me on YouTube. And, from May when I opened that, YouTube account until through the end of September, and then start in October, and it like exploded, and I have something like 8.5 thousand that watch me right now. So it's kind of crazy, but I know I'm just riding the wave that God wants me to provide information to people. So I'll do it while I can, which is why I haven't run away to Florida just yet. That and the whole I can't wear a mask on a plane. But so at any rate, I understand having the tens and tens of people that watch. I couldn't help. That was really funny. So it's super, like you said, we've allowed ourselves to really get into this position for a variety of things. We need to make sure that we're not taking the easy way out.
Right.
We need to make sure if we see an opportunity where we can be the one who makes a difference, whether it's to provide testimony, willing testimony about something you have seen where constitutionally protected God-given liberties are being trampled upon, that you set aside your busy schedule to figure out how to best help or serve in that area.
Right.
Whether it is you take on a particular cause, maybe you are someone who's going to lead your area, your community in, having your local school board or your local, your city council start recognizing they have constitutional duties and that they need to start enforcing the Constitution, even if that means not enforcing other things the government has put in place.
Right.
We each can do something somewhere. So whether it's someone like you that has, YouTube or BitChute or all those other things that I'm not cool enough to keep up on these days, to reach people and help spread the word about the truth, whether it's something as, simple as that, or whether it is, being out there and, knocking doors and telling people, having conversations, or, providing copies of the Constitution, planting seeds of truth with friends and family and coworkers to have them think about what they're doing and what they're allowing to be done. Those are all things that we really need to do. And to the people that really are concerned about, well, it doesn't feel right, we need to follow our authority. We have 1 Peter 2, verse 13, that wants us to submit ourselves to every authority instituted among men. And it lists, whether it's governors or kings or whatever that is. because they're supposed to be there to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. And
you and I did a video on that on the same day.
Well, and one of my favorite parts that I hadn't even realized, was really in the Bible, but he tells us in this same paragraph that we have to live as free men. Just don't use your freedom as a cover up for evil. So, and then in Romans 13, verses 1-7,
yep.
When we're talking about, obeying the governmental or, the government authority, don't forget to look at the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, that says it's a Republican form of government, or the preamble that says we the people created this government to begin with, or the Declaration of Independence that says we the people, we institute governments among men to protect our God-given liberties. Or look to the Minnesota or Michigan Article 1, Section 1, or preambles of the state constitutions that talk about we the people are creating our state government, and Article 1, Section 1 right after that talks about we're doing that because we the people have inherent political authority. We have the authority. That's literally the words of the very source of government documents that so when you read what scripture says and you read what the Constitution says, what it's telling you is, should you be obeying government that is not abiding by the very authority in which it can act? No. If the government, whether you're governor or legislators, whether it's the president or the Supreme Court or a local school board, any person in government, they cannot act unless they get that right to do so specifically in the state or federal constitutions. We don't have to get our permission from the Constitution because we have all of those enumerated rights and all of those unenumerated rights we talked about, and God is the one that gave them to us. And God says, live as free men. So if you combine all that, then sometimes the last thing that people hang on to is, but it's scary. And I'm going to get, picked on, or I'm going to, whatever. My business is going to go under because people, they don't like that I don't make people wear masks, or that I don't take down all their information and use it for contact tracing purposes and give it over to the government. And to that, I tell people there's a lot of things I normally carry around with me, but I can't reach any of my usual scripture pieces. But 2 Timothy 1-7, I think. Totally mixing up all my stuff here today.
You're fine, trust me. My viewers will understand.
Says that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And we need to make sure we're not living in fear. We're not living in fear of the virus. We have, I want to say it's Ezekiel that talks about, living, there's thorns and briars all around you, that scorpions all around you, and you need to stay strong and understand that when you're doing the right thing, it's going to suck at times, it's going to be hard, but still doing the right thing. So what is the right thing? Know your rights. Read the actual Constitution. Don't watch mainstream media at all. Read the source documents. Shoot, look at the CDC. Look at what it says about coronavirus if you're afraid of it, and realize that it's far less deadly than the flu, according to the CDC. Read those things, know what truth is, and don't be afraid to hold those responsible accountable for what they're doing wrong, because almost all of them are doing something wrong. So, I mean, we all can't move to South Dakota. So, well, the Black Hills are not as, exciting as Cocoa Beach. So,
Katherine, thank you very much. I did not intend to even take up this much time. You're harder to stop than I am. But you're
I'm an
passionate.
attorney.
That will not hold that against you. So
and a woman.
There again, not gonna hold that against. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your insight. And I actually am probably going to take forever trying to figure out how I'm gonna do this. I might have to parse this one out into a few videos. But you have no idea how much you have been a blessing to me today. And I hope that even having the conversation with a random stranger you've never met has been good for you as well. And as a side note, any links that you would like me to put into the description of the video, you have my email now, so go ahead and send those to me. And know that you are not alone. I know that you probably hear that a lot, but there are people out there who, that's why you got so many followers from September till November. You aren't alone, and I appreciate everything that you've done and everything that you had to say today. So thank you very much, and God bless. And now go get to work so that you can actually win your legal case.